My millionaire ex-husband invited me to be humiliated on New Year's Eve. I walked in with his secret twins. The invitation arrived in a cream envelope so expensive I could feel the wealth between my fingers. Adrian Vale, tech billionaire, my ex-husband of 7 years, was inviting me to his New Year's gala. The same man who'd replaced me faster than he replaced outdated technology, who'd sent his assistants flowers when I miscarried our baby, now wanted me at his celebration. I stared at that embossed silver crest while my 6-year-old twins played in the next room. Maya with her father's analytical gray eyes. Marcus with that same determined jawline. The children Adrian Vale never knew existed. When my former sister-in-law texted me the real reason for my invitation, he announcing his engagement at midnight. Elise Porter. Old money. He wants you there to prove he's moved on. Something shifted inside me. 7 years ago, I would have crumpled. But motherhood had made me stronger than Adrian could possibly imagine. I picked up my phone and typed, "Victoria Hayes accepts with pleasure. Plus 2 guests." Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they held all the power? Someone who had no idea what you were capable of? Hit that like button right now if you've ever wanted to show someone exactly who you've become. Thank you for helping Mr. Arden's Heart Stories reach 500 subscribers. Whether you've been with us from the beginning or just discovered our channel, your support means everything. Please share this video right now with anyone who's ever had to reinvent themselves after heartbreak or had to be both mother and father to their children. Have you ever watched someone try to humiliate you, only to discover you're not the same person they once knew? Or felt the power of standing your ground when everything is at stake? This story is about a woman whose ex-husband tried to use her as a prop in his perfect life, never suspecting she was about to change his world forever. By the end, you'll see how sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all, it's showing someone exactly what they've missed. I stood at my kitchen counter chopping vegetables for dinner, the invitation lying like a challenge on the scratched wooden table behind me. The knife hit the cutting board with more force than necessary as I remembered how Adrian had once insisted that the sound of cooking was too disruptive for his concentration. Our massive kitchen at Seacliff Manor had been designed to muffle such ordinary household noises. The kitchen where I now stood was small enough that I could touch both walls if I stretched out my arms. "Mom, can I have apple juice?" Maya stood in the doorway, her school uniform still neat after a full day of first grade. She had always been the careful one, methodical and precise in a way that sometimes made my heart ache with recognition. Of course. I reached for a plastic cup with no crystal here and filled it from the refrigerator. "Would you ask your brother if he wants some too?" She nodded seriously. "Marcus is building a tower, but I'll ask if he wants to hydrate." Hydrate. The vocabulary these two picked up from educational television never ceased to amaze me. As Maya disappeared down the hall, I turned back to the vegetables, the bright colors against the worn cutting board a reminder of how different our life was now. Simple. Honest. Built on love rather than prestige. Our apartment was modest by any standard, a far cry from the seaside mansion where I'd once lived as Mrs. Adrian Vale. 2 bedrooms with faded wallpaper I hadn't been able to change because we rented. Furniture collected from discount stores and garage sales. Children's artwork taped to the refrigerator instead of million-dollar paintings in gilded frames. But the twins had never known any different. They had never experienced the hollow emptiness of rooms designed to impress rather than comfort. They had never felt the chill of calculated social connections that characterized the world I'd left behind. The sound of Marcus's laughter echoed down the hallway, followed by Maya's more restrained giggle. In the world of wealth and power I'd once inhabited, children were accessories, heirs to be shaped and molded, not noisy, messy beings with opinions and needs that disrupted important business calls. "Mom, come see." Marcus's voice carried the excitement that always colored his words. "I've built the tallest tower ever." "Just a minute, honey. Let me finish dinner prep." "But it might fall." His footsteps pattered down the hall, and then he was beside me, tugging at my sleeve. His dark hair fell across his forehead in exactly the same way Adrian's did when he was deep in concentration. Please. I set down the knife. The tower that might fall was clearly more important than perfectly diced carrots. Of course, show me this architectural wonder. He beamed, gap-toothed and glorious, and led me by the hand to their bedroom where a precarious structure of wooden blocks and plastic construction toys reached nearly to his height. Maya sat cross-legged nearby, clearly the structural consultant on the project. Marcus built it all himself, she reported. I just suggested the wider base for increased stability. It's amazing, I told them, genuinely impressed. The most spectacular tower I've ever seen. Marcus puffed up with pride. When I grow up, I'm going to build real buildings. The tallest ones ever. I felt a pang, remembering how Adrian had described his family's real estate holdings to me when we first met. Not just buildings, Victoria. Legacy written in steel and glass. Maya tilted her head, studying her brother's creation. It needs a flag on top. Every important building has a flag. Their conversation continued as I returned to the kitchen, their voices blending with the sounds of cooking. These ordinary moments. Dinner preparation, block towers, juice in plastic cups had become my world. A world Adrian Vale had never experienced and would never understand. Later, after the twins were bathed and tucked into their beds, after story time and goodnight kisses, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine that cost less than Adrian probably spent on a single sock. The invitation sat before me, its expensive paper catching the dim light of our overhead fixture. New Year's Eve at Seacliff Manor. Black tie required. I ran my finger over the embossed lettering, remembering how Adrian had once explained the process of creating his family's stationery. The artisans in Italy who still made paper by hand. The custom dye for the Vale crest that cost more than most people's monthly salary. The specific weight and texture that communicated wealth without being gauche. What did he want from me now? Adrian Vale had never been sentimental. Every action served a purpose in his world of strategic business moves and calculated social advantages. An invitation to his former wife after 7 years of silence wasn't a gesture of goodwill. It was a chess move. I took another sip of wine and felt my phone vibrate with an incoming text. Daniela, Adrian's younger sister, the only member of the Vale family who had ever treated me with genuine warmth. Guess you got the invite. Are you going? I haven't decided, I typed back, though the idea had been forming since the moment I'd opened the envelope. 3 dots appeared as she typed, then, you should know he's announcing his engagement at midnight. Elise Porter. Society pages are buzzing. Thought you should know. Ah. There it was. The purpose behind the seemingly gracious invitation. Adrian wasn't extending an olive branch. He was orchestrating a public demonstration of his triumph, his perfect new beginning with the daughter of one of the oldest banking families in America. Old money to complement the Vale's new tech wealth. A merger of dynasties, with me as the discarded first draft who had been rightfully edited from the final manuscript. Thanks for the heads up, I replied to Daniela. I appreciate you looking out for me. Always. You know the Valles aren't big on emotional intelligence. Adrian probably thinks he's being magnanimous. I set down my phone and picked up the invitation again. 7 years ago, this kind of calculated humiliation would have devastated me. I would have cried for days, questioned everything about myself, felt the inadequacy that Adrian's family had so carefully cultivated in me. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Motherhood had burned away my softer edges, leaving something stronger and more defined. The Victoria who had once been dazzled by Adrian Vale's world no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who had survived heartbreak, built a life from scratch, and raised 2 extraordinary children alone. I picked up my phone again, found Adrian's contact information never deleted, though never used, and hovered my thumb over the number. I could call him. Ask him directly why he'd invited me after all this time. Hear the careful explanation that would reveal nothing of his true motives. Instead, I opened my email and typed a response to the RSVP address listed on the invitation. Victoria Hayes accepts with pleasure. Plus 2 guests. The cursor blinked after those words, waiting for me to add more. An explanation, perhaps. A question about the appropriateness of bringing children to such an event. But I added nothing else before hitting send. Let Adrian Vale wonder. Let him assume I was bringing a date, perhaps, or friends for moral support. Let him think whatever he wanted until the moment I walked into Seacliff Manor with the twins he'd never known existed. If you've ever been the underdog who finally found their power, tap the like button right now. Comment, no longer invisible, if you understand what it means to finally be seen on your own terms. 7 years earlier, I had been Victoria Hayes, art historian and associate curator at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, when Adrian Vale entered my life like a force of nature. My focus had always been educational outreach, developing programs that brought fine art to public school children who might otherwise never set foot in a museum. It was fulfilling work, if not particularly lucrative. The night we met, I was overseeing a special exhibition opening that showcased emerging artists from underrepresented communities. My simple black dress had been carefully selected to be professional yet unremarkable. The art was meant to be the focus, not the staff. Adrian Vale moved through the gallery with the confidence of someone accustomed to owning whatever space he occupied. At 33, he was already controlling a significant portion of his family's technology and real estate empire, his name regularly featured in business magazines and tech industry profiles. I recognized him immediately but made no special effort to approach. Men like Adrian Vale were common enough at museum functions, wealthy potential donors who attended out of social obligation rather than genuine interest. When he stopped before a large mixed-media piece created by a young artist from Oakland's most challenged neighborhood, I expected him to glance at it briefly before moving on to the wine service. Instead, he stood studying it with unexpected intensity. "I'm curious about the artist's choice of materials here," he said when I approached, not looking away from the piece. "The juxtaposition of industrial elements with these more organic forms suggests a commentary on urban development displacing natural spaces." His observation was surprisingly insightful for someone I had mentally categorized as just another rich tech executive. "I find it interesting that you focused on that aspect," I replied. "Most viewers are drawn to the color palette first." He turned then, his gray eyes assessing me with the same intensity he'd given the artwork. "I don't imagine you curated this exhibition to focus on what most viewers notice first." The directness of his gaze was disconcerting. "You're right. We're specifically showcasing artists who challenge conventional perspectives." A smile touched the corner of his mouth, transforming his serious expression into something more approachable. "Adrian Vale," he said, extending his hand. "Victoria Hayes. I know who you are, Mr. Vale. Adrian, please." His handshake was firm without being aggressive. "And what can you tell me about the artist who created this piece?" For the next 30 minutes, we moved through the exhibition, discussing each work in detail. His questions were thoughtful, revealing a depth of knowledge about art that surprised me. When the event concluded, he asked if I'd join him for a late dinner to discuss potential donations to your educational programs, he clarified, noting my hesitation. I agreed, assuming we'd go to the museum's affiliated restaurant. Instead, his driver took us to a small, exclusive restaurant where the maitre d' greeted him by name and led us to a private table overlooking the bay. The menu had no prices, never a good sign for someone on a museum educator's salary. "Don't worry about the cost," Adrian said, reading my expression as I scanned the offerings. "This is a business dinner, after all." I selected the least extravagant-sounding entree and watched as he ordered wine that I suspected cost more than my monthly rent. When the sommelier left, an awkward silence fell between us, the inevitable adjustment as two people from vastly different worlds attempted to find common ground. "I rarely meet people who care so deeply about things that offer no monetary return," he said finally, studying me over the rim of his wine glass. "Most people in my circles view art as an investment vehicle, not as something with intrinsic value." "Not everything valuable can be quantified," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. Some things matter precisely because they can't be reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet. He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his face from handsome to almost boyishly charming. Precisely why I find you fascinating, Victoria Hayes. You live in a completely different reality than I do. What followed was unlike any first date I'd ever experienced, if it was even a date at all. We talked about art, yes, but also philosophy, education, urban development, and the responsibility of wealth. Adrian spoke of his family's expectations with surprising candor, revealing the weight of being the heir to the Vale Empire. My father believes anything of value can be acquired if you're willing to pay the right price, he said as our dessert arrived. It's the foundation of his business philosophy. Identify assets, determine their worth, acquire them before competitors recognize their potential. And you? I asked. Do you share that philosophy? I used to, he admitted. But lately, I've been questioning it. Some of the most important things, perhaps, can't be acquired through strategic investment. Such as authenticity, purpose, genuine connection. The way he looked at me as he said those words made something shift in my chest, a recognition that beneath the polished exterior of Adrian Vale, tech scion and business prodigy, existed a man searching for meaning beyond his family's definition of success. When he called the next day to ask if I'd join him for a weekend trip to see a limited exhibition at a small gallery in Santa Fe, I should have declined. A private jet, a luxury hotel, a man I barely knew, all the elements my mother had warned me about when I left our small Midwestern town for California. Instead, I said yes. And that yes began a courtship unlike anything I could have imagined. Adrian Vale pursued me with the same intensity he brought to his business acquisitions, but there was something more authentic in his attention. When we hiked coastal trails, he left his phone behind, something, I later learned, that shocked his executive assistant to the core. When we visited small, obscure galleries, he engaged with the artists directly, asking questions about their process rather than their price points. On our third date, he took me to a dive bar in a part of San Francisco his family would never visit. We sat in a scratched booth, drinking beer from bottles while a local band played covers of 80s songs. No one here knows who I am, he said, looking around with something like wonder. No one cares about Vale Technologies or my family's net worth or what our stock did today. Is that important to you? I asked. More than I realized, he admitted. With you, I'm just Adrian. Not the Vale heir, not the tech wunderkind, not the strategic acquisition machine. Just a man having a beer with a beautiful, intelligent woman who doesn't give a damn about my family's money. I wouldn't say I don't give a damn, I teased. I'm aware of who you are. I just don't find it particularly relevant to whether I enjoy your company. He laughed then, head thrown back, the sound so genuine it drew glances from nearby tables. You're extraordinary, Victoria Hayes. Like a rare find my competitors haven't discovered yet. I should have recognized the warning in those words, the way he still framed his attraction in terms of acquisition and rarity. But I was already falling for the man I believed existed beneath the Vale Empire, the one who sketched surprisingly insightful drawings in the margins of financial reports, who could discuss obscure artists with genuine enthusiasm, who looked at me like I was the most fascinating exhibit he'd ever encountered. After 2 months, he took me to meet his parents at the Vale family estate in Woodside. The sprawling property with its manicured gardens and security detail felt like entering another country, one with its own customs and unspoken rules that I couldn't possibly understand without a translator. Gregory and Marianne Vale greeted me with practiced politeness that never reached their eyes. During dinner in a dining room larger than my entire apartment, they asked carefully crafted questions designed to highlight the vast differences between their world and mine. And your family is from? Marianne asked, her perfect French manicure tapping against her wine glass. Iowa, I replied. My father was a high school history teacher. My mother still runs the local library. How quaint, she murmured, exchanging a glance with her husband that spoke volumes. Later, in Adrian's childhood bedroom larger than most master suites, I sat on the edge of his bed feeling like an anthropologist who had ventured too deep into a foreign culture. "They'll never accept me," I said quietly. "I'm not part of this world, Adrian. I don't even want to be part of this world." He knelt before me, taking my hands in his. "They don't need to accept you. I accepted you. That's enough." "But is it? Your family, your background, it's so different from mine." He pressed his forehead to mine. "That's precisely why this works, Victoria. You're real in a way nothing in my life has ever been. You care about things that matter, not share prices or social standing. You make me want to be better than my inheritance." When he proposed 6 months later, my friends warned me it was too soon. A strategic acquisition, his father implied during his cold toast at our wedding. But I believed we were proving everyone wrong. We built Seacliff Manor together, my artistic vision softening his preference for stark minimalism. I continued my work at the museum while he expanded Veil Technologies into international markets. For 3 years, I believed we were the exception to the rule that said people from different worlds couldn't bridge the gap between them. I believed that real, authentic love could overcome the weight of family expectations and ingrained values. I was wrong. The fractures appeared slowly at first, hairline cracks in the foundation of what I'd thought was an unshakable connection. Board meetings that suddenly couldn't be missed, even though they fell on my birthday. Silent D. Ners where Adrian's mind remained at work, his responses to my questions about his day perfunctory at best. His family's subtle but persistent messaging that I was a temporary distraction from his responsibilities to the Veil legacy became less subtle over time. Marianne's comments about when we might start a family, the Veil name needs proper heirs, Victoria, not just your little museum projects, grew more pointed at each holiday gathering. Adrian's defense of me, once fierce and unwavering, became distracted and half-hearted. "Yes, Mother, Victoria's work is important too. We'll consider children when the time is right." "When exactly will that be?" I asked him one night after a particularly painful dinner with his parents. "When things settle at work," he replied, not looking up from his laptop. "The Asian expansion is consuming all my bandwidth right now." "Things never settle at work for you, Adrian. There's always another expansion, another acquisition, another market to conquer. That's the nature of business in the technology sector. We can't afford to stand still." "And what about us? Are we standing still while you conquer the world?" He looked up then, genuine confusion in his eyes. "What are you talking about? We're fine." "Are we? When was the last time we had dinner without your phone on the table? When was the last time we took one of those coastal hikes you loved so much?" He sighed, rubbing his eyes. "This is temporary, Victoria. Once the expansion stabilizes, we'll have more time." But it wasn't temporary. It was the new normal, a shifting of priorities back to the Veil legacy, with me gradually becoming what his family had always seen me as, an accessory, an interesting diversion that had gone on too long. The final break came swiftly. Veil Technologies was facing a hostile takeover attempt from a major competitor. Adrian worked 18-hour days, coming home only to shower and change clothes. When I discovered I was pregnant after years of hoping, I planned a special dinner to share the news. Adrian called to cancel, his voice distracted as he explained that a crucial negotiation required his presence. 2 weeks later, I miscarried alone in our bathroom, blood staining the imported Italian marble tiles. When the cramping became severe, I called an ambulance, then Adrian's private line. It went straight to voicemail. His assistant sent flowers to the hospital with a note that I later learned she had written herself because Adrian was in meetings that couldn't be interrupted. He appeared 3 days later, apologetic but distracted, the dark circles under his eyes testament to the pressure he was under. "This isn't working," I said, still pale from blood loss and grief. "It's temporary," he replied, checking his watch. "The deal closes next week." "I'm not talking about the deal." He looked at me then, truly looked, for the first time in months. "What are you saying?" I'm saying I can't be another asset in your portfolio, appreciated when valuable and ignored when inconvenient. His expression hardened, the business mask sliding back into place. That's an unfair characterization. Is it? When was the last time you asked about my day? About the program I've been building for 3 years? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't scheduled? You knew who I was when you married me. No, I said quietly. I thought I knew who you could be. The divorce was efficient, like everything in Adrian's world. His lawyers were thorough, mine overwhelmed. I walked away with a settlement generous enough to prevent gossip but modest enough to ensure I understood my place in the hierarchy of his priorities. Seacliff Manor, the home we had built together, went to Adrian without debate. It was on Vale family land, after all, and had been purchased primarily with his money. My art collection, the one personal passion Adrian had always supported, was divided with mathematical precision. I was permitted to select 3 pieces, he kept the rest as investments. In the end, I left with enough money to start over modestly, but without the lifestyle I had grown accustomed to as Mrs. Adrian Vale. It was both terrifying and strangely liberating, like stepping out of a costume I had been wearing for someone else's benefit. What Adrian's efficient legal team didn't know until 2 weeks after signing the final divorce papers was that I was pregnant again. With twins. A parting gift from our last attempt at reconciliation, a night when Adrian had returned home early, temporarily victorious in his business battle, momentarily the man I had first fallen in love with. I considered telling him. Drafted emails. Picked up the phone countless times. Even drove to the Vale Technologies headquarters once, sitting in the parking lot with my hand on my still flat stomach, gathering courage that ultimately failed me. Each time, I remembered his absence during my miscarriage. The flowers with the impersonal note. The way he'd looked at his watch while I tried to explain my grief. The final words his mother had said to me after the divorce was finalized. You never did understand what it means to be a Vale. My children deserved better than to be inconvenient additions to Adrian's carefully structured life, heirs to the Vale legacy but not truly seen as individuals. They deserved to be cherished, prioritized, treated as the miracles they were, not as extensions of a business empire. So I disappeared from Adrian's world entirely, moving across the bay to Oakland, taking a job at a smaller museum with a robust educational department. I built a life centered around Maya and Marcus, finding strength I never knew I possessed in the everyday challenges of single motherhood. When the twins were born on a rainy September morning, the nurse asked for their father's name for the birth certificates. I hesitated only briefly before saying, "Father unknown." It wasn't entirely a lie. The Adrian who had once hiked coastal trails with me, who had sketched in the margins of reports and laughed in dive bars, was indeed unknown to me now. In his place was a stranger who had revealed himself to be exactly what his family had raised him to be, a Vale first and a human second. For 7 years, that was enough. I created a life so separate from the world of wealth and power that sometimes weeks would pass without me even thinking of Adrian. The twins grew from helpless infants to curious, brilliant children with personalities all their own. Maya with her careful analysis of everything, Marcus with his intuitive leaps and boundless energy. I watched for signs of Adrian in them beyond the physical resemblance that sometimes took my breath away, and found both comfort and pain in the similarities. Maya's intense focus when solving problems. Marcus's quick grasp of spatial relationships. Their shared ability to see patterns that others missed. But they were their own people too, shaped by a life Adrian knew nothing about. They had never experienced private jets or family estates with security details. Their world was public parks and library story times, museum free days and discount store shopping trips. They were growing up with values I had chosen for them, not the Vale family ethos of acquisition and expansion at all costs. For 7 years, that was enough, until the invitation arrived to remind me that the past is never truly finished with us, no matter how carefully we try to seal it away. If you know what it's like to rebuild your life from scratch, to find strength you never knew you had, tap that like button right now. Comment, stronger now, if you've ever surprised yourself with what you could endure and overcome when you had no choice but to keep going. The weeks before the New Year's Eve gala passed in a blur of preparation and second-guessing. Once I had made the decision to attend to bring the twins and reveal the truth, Adrian had never known 100 practical questions arose. What would Maya and Marcus wear to such an event? My own wardrobe, adapted for the life of a working single mother, contained nothing remotely suitable for a black tie gathering at Seacliff Manor. The settlement money from the divorce had long since been invested in our modest home and the twins' education fund. There was little left for extravagances like designer gowns or custom tuxedos for 6-year-olds. Still, I refused to appear diminished. Adrian would be expecting the fated ex-wife, perhaps a little desperate, a little eager to reclaim even a sliver of the life she'd lost. I was determined to show him someone entirely different from a woman who had found herself in his absence. The twins and I made an adventure of it, visiting consignment shops in the more affluent neighborhoods across the bay. In the third store, I found a midnight blue gown that took my breath away, once worn to the Oscars by an actress whose star had faded, now available at a price I could justify as an investment in my dignity. What do you think? I asked, turning slowly for the twins' inspection after trying it on. Is it special enough for a fancy New Year's party? Maya studied me with the serious consideration she brought to all aesthetic decisions. It makes your eyes look like the ocean, she declared finally. It's magic. Marcus was less analytical in his assessment. You look like the night sky, he said, reaching out to touch the beaded bodice. All sparkly and beautiful. I bent to kiss his forehead, inhaling the scent of the child-friendly shampoo I used to wash his dark hair so like his father's, yet untamed in a way Adrian's never was. That decides it, then. This is the one. Finding appropriate attire for the twins proved less challenging than I'd feared. A local children's boutique was having an after-Christmas sale, and the owner, charmed by Maya's serious questions about fabric quality and Marcus's excitement about his first real suit, offered an additional discount that brought the prices within my budget. I still hadn't told them who we were going to meet. Only that it was an important party at a beautiful house by the ocean. How do you tell 6-year-olds that they're about to meet the father who doesn't know they exist? That the life they've known, just the three of us against the world, might change in ways I couldn't predict? The night before the gala, after bath time but before lights out, I sat on the edge of Maya's bed during our usual story time, the well-worn copy of their favorite book set aside for a different kind of tale. The party tomorrow is at a special house, I began carefully. It belongs to someone I used to know. Someone important. Marcus, already in his own bed across their shared room, perked up. Like a celebrity? Not exactly. He's... I searched for words they would understand. He's your father. The silence that followed was heavier than I expected, filling the small bedroom with unasked questions. Like other kids have? Maya asked finally, her analytical mind making connections between this revelation and her observations of families at school. Yes, exactly like that. Does he know about us? Marcus's question cut straight to the heart of the matter, his intuition as sharp as ever. I shook my head. No. I haven't seen him since before you were born. Is he bad? Maya's voice was small, uncertain in a way that made my chest ache. No, sweetheart. He's not bad. He's just... I struggled again to find words that were truthful without being damaging. He's someone who focuses very much on his work. On building things and making money. More than people. Marcus asked. Sometimes, yes. Then why are we going? Maya's question was perfectly reasonable. The practical one, always looking for the logic behind actions. I considered lying, offering a simple explanation that would satisfy them without revealing the complex emotions driving my decision. Instead, I gave them the truth they deserved. Because he should know you exist. Because you have a right to know him. And because sometimes people change when they discover something important they've been missing. They accepted this with the remarkable adaptability of children, asking practical questions about what to wear and whether there would be other kids at the party. I answered as honestly as I could, promising that we would stay together and leave if anyone felt uncomfortable. After tucking them in and turning out the light, I lingered in the hallway, listening to their whispered conversation, Maya's measured questions and Marcus's more excited speculations about what their father might be like. Eventually, their voices grew quieter, then silent as sleep claimed them. I moved to the small living room and poured myself a glass of wine, questioning for the 100th time whether I was doing the right thing. Was I using my children to make a point? Was exposing them to Adrian's world, even briefly, a selfish act of revenge rather than the principled stand I'd convinced myself it was? I thought about calling Daniela, the only Vale who might understand the complexity of what I was feeling. But this wasn't her burden to carry. The decision to keep the twins from Adrian had been mine alone, the decision to reveal them now had to be mine as well. By morning, the doubts had receded, replaced by a calm certainty as I watched Maya and Marcus carefully put on the outfits we'd chosen together. Marcus in his first tiny suit, struggling with buttons but refusing help because big boys dress themselves, Mom. Maya in an emerald dress that matched her eyes, her dark hair pulled back with a silver clip that had been a gift from my mother. Ready for an adventure? I asked them, my own gown carefully packed in a garment bag for changing later. They nodded solemnly, taking my hands as we walked to the car I'd borrowed from a colleague for the occasion. My own aging sedan didn't seem right for this particular journey. We're ready, Mom, Maya said, speaking for both of them as she often did. And somehow, finally, I was too. The drive from Oakland to the coastal road that led to Seacliff Manor took us through changing landscapes, urban streets giving way to suburbs, then to the winding highway that hugged the Pacific. I pointed out landmarks to keep the twins engaged, though in truth, my attention was focused on the approaching confrontation. Would Adrian be angry? Shocked? Would he doubt the twins were his, demand proof, reject them outright? Or would he see what was plain in their faces, the unmistakable Vale features, the genetic heritage no legal document could erase? As we approached the turnoff to the private road leading to Seacliff, I felt Maya's small hand touch my shoulder from the back seat. Are you scared, Mom? She asked, her perception sharp as always. I met her eyes in the rearview mirror. A little, I admitted. It's been a long time since I've seen your father. Marcus leaned forward. If he's mean to you, we'll protect you. The fierceness in his voice made me smile despite my nerves. That's very brave of you, but I don't think we'll need protection. We're just going to show him who we are, and then we'll see what happens next. Like a science experiment, Maya suggested. With variables and outcomes. Exactly like that, I agreed, turning onto the private drive that would lead us to the next chapter of our complicated story. The sun was setting as we approached Seacliff Manor, bathing the modern glass and stone structure in golden light that made it look like something from a fairy tale rather than the site of my greatest heartbreak. I had arranged for us to change at a small hotel nearby, and now, dressed in our formal attire, we made the final approach in a taxi whose driver had raised his eyebrows at the unlikely trio heading to one of the most exclusive addresses on the coast. Seacliff Manor glowed against the darkening sky, windows blazing with light that spilled onto the manicured grounds. As our taxi wound up the long driveway, I felt the twins' hands tighten in mine. It's so big, Marcus whispered. Like a castle, Maya agreed. It had never felt like home to me, even when I'd lived there. Too many echoing spaces, too much conscious display of wealth. But seeing it through their eyes, this fairy tale palace perched between forest and ocean, I understood its magic in a new way. I paid the taxi driver and stood for a moment at the base of the wide stone steps leading to the entrance. Music and conversation spilled from the open doors, along with the golden light that seemed to beckon us inside. For a brief moment, I considered turning back, hailing the taxi again, returning to our simple life, preserving the twins from whatever might happen once we crossed that threshold. Then Marcus tugged at my hand. Can we go in now? I want to see inside the castle. His excitement steadied me. Yes, of course. Remember what we talked about. Stay close to me, and if anything makes you uncomfortable, just squeeze my hand 3 times. They nodded in unison, and we ascended the steps together. The entrance hall was already crowded with San Francisco's elite. Women draped in designer gowns that probably cost more than my annual salary, men in perfectly tailored tuxedos that displayed wealth in their subtle details. The air thick with expensive perfume and the particular confidence of people accustomed to belonging in exclusive spaces. A server offered champagne from a silver tray. I took a glass, needing something to steady my nerves, and asked for apple juice for the twins. The server's eyebrows rose slightly at the presence of children at such an event but recovered his professional demeanor quickly. I felt eyes turning toward us as we moved deeper into the house, the whispers beginning as people recognized the ex-wife, accompanied by 2 children who bore the unmistakable veil features. Marcus with Adrian's sharp jawline, Maya with his intense gray eyes. I kept my head high, my hand gentle but firm on the twins' shoulders. Victoria. The voice cut through the murmur of conversation, warm and genuine. Daniela found us immediately, elegant in black and silver, her expression shifting from welcome to shock as she registered the twins. My God, Victoria, she whispered, bending to their height. They're Maya and Marcus, I supplied. My children. She looked up at me, questions burning in her eyes. Does he? Not yet. Daniela straightened, a slow smile spreading across her face. Well, this should make for an interesting evening. She squeezed my hand. He's in the main hall with Elise and her parents. Making the rounds before the announcement at midnight. Perfect timing, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Shall we? As we made our way through the house, I noticed the changes that had been made since my departure. The art collection I had carefully curated during my marriage had been replaced with more conventional pieces, beautiful but safe, the kind of art that signaled wealth without requiring actual engagement from the viewer. The main hall had been transformed since my time at Seacliff. Gone were the contemporary art pieces I'd selected, replaced with more traditional displays of wealth. Crystal chandeliers, Baroque furniture, old masters on the walls, Elise's influence, no doubt. The Porter family had old money, generations of it, unlike the Valle's relatively recent tech fortune. Adrian stood near the center of the room, still magnetic at 40, silver threading his dark hair at the temples in a way that only enhanced his appeal. His tuxedo was impeccable, his posture commanding. Beside him stood a willowy blonde in a white gown that probably cost more than my car, her hand resting possessively on his arm as they spoke with an older couple I recognized from society pages as the Porters. Maya's grip on my hand tightened. Is that him? She whispered, her eyes fixed on Adrian. Yes, I confirmed. That's your father. He looks like Marcus, but older, she observed with her typical precision. Before I could respond, Adrian S.A.W. me. Our eyes met across the crowded room, his practiced social smile freezing as recognition dawned. I watched his gaze drop to the children beside me, confusion flickering briefly before his composure returned with the efficiency of a man accustomed to handling unexpected business developments. He said something to Elise, who frowned slightly, then excused himself from his group and moved toward us, navigating the crowd with practiced ease. I felt my heart rate increase but kept my expression neutral, my grip on the twins' hand steady. Victoria, he said when he reached us, his voice controlled despite the shock I could see in his eyes. This is unexpected. Is it? I RSVP'd with my +2. I looked down at the twins. Maya, Marcus, this is Mr. Vale. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly, taking in their features with the same analytical precision he applied to balance sheets and market projections. I could almost see the calculations running behind those gray eyes, the timeline, the resemblance, the implications for his carefully ordered life. Hello, Maya said formally, extending her small hand as I taught her. It's nice to meet you. Adrian took it automatically, then Marcus's when offered, the gesture revealing his ingrained social training even in moments of profound shock. There's 6, I said into the loaded silence. Born September 12th. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a flash of something I couldn't identify: anger, shock, perhaps even fear. The renowned Adrian Vale, master of preparation and contingency planning, completely blindsided. "My office," he said quietly, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Now." I nodded to Daniela, who immediately understood, offering to show the twins the dessert table while the grown-ups talked for a minute. The twins looked to me for confirmation. I hesitated, then nodded. "It's okay. I'll be right back. Aunt Daniela will take good care of you." My sister-in-law winked at the twins. "I hear they have chocolate fountains this year. And probably ice cream." Marcus's face lit up at this news, but Maya's eyes remained on me, concern evident in her expression. "It's okay," I reassured her. "Remember our signal if you need me." She nodded solemnly, then allowed Daniela to lead them away, glancing back once as they disappeared into the crowd. We walked in silence through the crowded rooms to his office, the one space in Seacliff that had always been exclusively his. The modern minimalist design was exactly as I remembered: clean lines, monochromatic color scheme, windows overlooking the ocean. When the door closed behind us, the party sounds muffled, he turned to me with controlled fury. 6 years. 6 years, Victoria, and not a word. I met his gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated. "Would you have cared? Be honest. When I lost our first baby, you sent flowers with your assistant's signature. You were building an empire. What room was there for children? That's not a decision you had the right to make alone." "No." I stepped closer. "When we divorced, your lawyers made it very clear what I was worth to you. A settlement sufficient to avoid embarrassment but not enough to impact your lifestyle. You moved on immediately, back to your real priorities. So this is revenge?" Showing up at my engagement announcement with he stopped, his jaw tightening. "With your children? This isn't revenge, Adrian. This is reality. Maya and Marcus exist. They're brilliant and kind and curious about everything. They deserve to know their father, and you deserve to know them if you want to." His hand went to the crystal tumbler on his desk, pouring 2 fingers of scotch with the same precision he applied to everything. "He didn't offer me any. How can I be sure they're mine?" he asked, his voice deliberately cold. The question should have hurt, but I'd anticipated it. Adrian trusted data, not emotions. "Look at them," I said simply. "Maya has your eyes, your analytical mind. Marcus has your profile, your intuitive approach to problems. But if you need scientific proof, I'm happy to arrange it. I have nothing to hide." He took a long drink, then set the glass down carefully. "Why now?" "Because they're asking questions I can't answer alone. Because they deserve more than half a story about who they are and where they come from. Because I hesitated, then committed to the full truth. Because I thought you might have changed." He laughed, short and without humor. "Based on what evidence?" "The invitation. After 7 years of silence, you reached out. I thought perhaps I invited you because Elise insisted on clearing the air before our marriage. Making peace with the past. I didn't expect you to bring a nuclear option to a peace talk." The word stung, but I refused to show it. "Our children aren't weapons, Adrian. They're people. Small, vulnerable people who deserve to know both their parents if possible." He turned away, looking out the window toward the ocean we'd once watched together. The silence stretched between us, filled with 7 years of separate lives and the weight of decisions that couldn't be undone. "What do you want?" he asked finally, his voice quieter. "Money? Recognition? Your name back in the society pages as the mother of Vale heirs?" "I want nothing for myself," I said. "For them, I want whatever you're willing to genuinely offer. Time. Interest. Consistency." I moved to stand beside him at the window. "They don't need your money, Adrian. They need what all children need to be seen for who they are, not what they represent." He turned to look at me then, really look, in a way he rarely had during our marriage. You've changed. Parenthood does that. And your life now? You're happy. The question surprised me with its sincerity. It's not the life I imagined when we met. It's smaller, harder in some ways. But yes, I'm happy. They make me happy. Another silence, less tense than the last. I need time to process this, he said finally. To consider the implications. Of course he did. Adrian Vale never made impulsive decisions. Take whatever time you need, I replied. We've managed for 6 years. We'll continue to manage. I moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for springing this on you tonight. The timing was not my most mature decision. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, it wasn't. But it was effective. He straightened his jacket. I should return to my guests. You and the children are welcome to stay, of course. Thank you, but we'll go. This is still your night with Elise. He nodded, then asked, may I meet them properly before you leave? Just for a moment. The request held no demand, no entitlement. Just a simple desire that surprised me with its humanity. Of course. If you've ever had to have a difficult conversation that changed everything, tap that like button right now. Comment, brave truth, if you've ever had to speak a reality that others weren't ready to hear. We found the twins with Daniela, their small plates piled with desserts they'd likely never seen before. Maya was carefully dissecting a chocolate truffle, examining its layers with scientific interest, while Marcus had apparently decided to sample one of everything available. They looked up as we approached, their expressions curious but not afraid. Adrian seemed momentarily at a loss, the business titan suddenly uncertain in the presence of these small versions of himself. He knelt to their level, something I'd never seen him do before. Adrian Vale, whose bespoke suits were not designed for such casual interactions with the floor. Hello again, he said, his voice gentler than I'd heard in years. I understand you're Maya and Marcus. They nodded in unison. Do you like the party? He asked. The food is amazing, Marcus said immediately, chocolate evident at the corner of his mouth. But the music is kind of boring. Adrian laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. I agree. What music do you prefer? He likes rock, Maya supplied, studying Adrian with the careful assessment she brought to all new situations. I like classical. Mom takes us to the children's concerts at the symphony. Does she? Adrian glanced up at me. Your mother always did have excellent taste in arts. She says you build things, Maya continued, her analytical mind seeking concrete information. Companies and buildings. I do, yes. I like building too, Marcus said, leaning forward with sudden enthusiasm. But with Legos and stuff. I made a tower taller than me yesterday. Perhaps you could show me sometime, Adrian replied, the words clearly surprising himself as much as me. Really? Marcus's eyes widened. You could come see my buildings. The moment stretched, filled with possibilities none of us had anticipated when the evening began. Then Adrian stood, composing himself again. It was very nice to meet you both, he said formally. I hope we'll have a chance to talk again soon. As we prepared to leave, he pulled me aside briefly. I'll call tomorrow. To discuss arrangements. If that's acceptable. It is. Outside, waiting for our taxi, Maya looked up at the stars emerging above the cliffs. He seems sad, she observed. Does he? I asked, surprised by her perception. She nodded seriously. Like he's missing something and just realized it. From the mouths of babes, I thought, as our taxi arrived to take us back to our simpler life. Is he going to be in our family now? Marcus asked as we drove away from Seacliff, the lights of the manor receding behind us. I don't know, I answered honestly. That's something we'll all need to figure out together. Maya, who had been quiet since we left, finally spoke. He looked at us like we were puzzles he couldn't solve. The accuracy of her observation made me smile despite the emotional exhaustion of the evening. That's because you are puzzles he can't solve. You're completely new to him. But not to you, she said, resting her head against my shoulder. You already know all our pieces. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with the chocolate she'd consumed. Not all your pieces, sweet girl. You keep adding new ones every day. That's what makes being your mom so amazing. The twins fell asleep during the drive back to Oakland, the excitement of the evening finally catching up to them. As I carried them one by one from the taxi to their beds, still in their party clothes, I wondered what the morning would bring. Had I altered the course of our lives irrevocably? Would Adrian follow through on his promise to call, or would the cold light of day lead him to a more strategic approach, perhaps through lawyers or intermediaries? The Adrian I had married would have called exactly when he said he would. The Adrian who had emerged in the years since, the one shaped by his father's influence and business imperatives, was less predictable to me. I was still pondering these questions when my phone rang the next morning as I prepared breakfast. Adrian's name appeared on the screen, exactly at 9 a.m., the earliest hour that could be considered polite for a social call. Hello, I answered, stepping into the living room to avoid waking the still sleeping twins. Victoria. His voice was formal but not cold. Are the children awake? Not yet. The party ran past their usual bedtime. A pause. Of course. I'd like to discuss arrangements for a paternity test. The direct approach, then. I had expected nothing less. Is that necessary? The resemblance is rather obvious, for legal purposes, yes. His tone was matter-of-fact. I've scheduled an appointment with a private lab for tomorrow at 10, if that works for you and the children. They use a simple cheek swab. Non-invasive. I suppressed a smile at his efficiency. Adrian Vale, processing this emotional earthquake with the same methodical approach he would bring to a corporate restructuring. That should be fine. Shall we meet you there? I'll text you the address. My assistant can arrange a car service if that would be helpful. That won't be necessary. We can make our own way. Another pause. Very well. There are other matters we should discuss. Perhaps lunch afterward. Somewhere the children might be comfortable. The tentative note in his voice surprised me. Are you sure? You must have a lot to process. I do, he acknowledged. But I prefer to process it with all the relevant information. That includes getting to know Maya and Marcus, even in this preliminary stage. I agreed to lunch, and we ended the call with the polite formality of business associates rather than former spouses or future co-parents. When I returned to the kitchen, I found Maya standing in the doorway, still in her rumpled party dress, her hair tangled from sleep. Was that him? She asked. Yes. He'd like us to meet him tomorrow for a test to confirm he's your father, then have lunch. She considered this with her usual seriousness. Is he still going to marry that lady in the white dress? I smiled at her directness. Yes, I believe so. That doesn't change anything about you and Marcus, though. She nodded, processing this. Can I wear my normal clothes to lunch? The dress was pretty but not very functional. My brilliant, practical daughter is more concerned with functionality than impressing her billionaire father. Absolutely. Wear whatever makes you comfortable. Adrian did call the next day, and the day after. First with practical questions about paternity tests, which confirmed what was visibly obvious, then about the twin schedules, interests, health histories. He approached fatherhood like any other project, researching thoroughly, identifying key requirements, developing a strategic plan for optimal results. But something shifted during those early conversations. His questions became less clinical over time, more genuinely curious. He wanted to know Maya's favorite books, Marcus's preferred Lego building techniques. He listened carefully when I explained their routines, their personalities, their individual quirks and preferences. 2 weeks after the gala, he appeared at our modest apartment with 3 large boxes, looking oddly vulnerable in his casual weekend attire, designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent, but casual nonetheless. Legos, he explained awkwardly as he set the boxes down in our small living room. Engineering sets. I didn't know what they might like, so I brought options. The twins, initially shy in this unfamiliar configuration with their father in their space, rather than the brief meeting at a fancy party, approached the boxes with restrained curiosity. Adrian stood back, watching them with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. When Marcus opened the first box and let out a whoop of delight at the advanced Lego architecture set inside, Adrian's face transformed. The mask of the controlled businessman fell away, replaced by something rawer, more authentic. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I'd fallen in love with years before, capable of genuine joy unrelated to business success or strategic advantage. "This is the Empire State Building," Marcus exclaimed, examining the box with reverence. "It has 3,000 pieces." "I thought we might build it together," Adrian said, his voice carefully casual. "If you'd like some help." Marcus looked up at him, surprise and delight warring on his small face. "You know how to build Legos?" "I designed a modular housing system for my graduate thesis at MIT," Adrian replied. "Legos operate on similar principles of interlocking load-bearing elements." Maya, who had been examining her own box containing a sophisticated electronics kit, looked up with sudden interest. "You went to MIT?" "For engineering, yes. Before business school." "I'm going to MIT too," she declared with absolute certainty. "Then I'm going to design computers that can think like people." Adrian's eyes met mine over the children's heads, a moment of shared recognition passing between us. "She's extraordinary," his expression seemed to say. "They both are," I replied silently. It was the beginning of something none of us could have predicted on that New Year's Eve. Not an instant family, not a reconciliation between Adrian and me, but something more complex and ultimately more valuable, a gradual, deliberate connection built on who we were now, not who we had been. The path was not without its complications. Adrian's engagement to Elise proceeded as planned, though the society pages noted that the wedding date had been pushed back several months for unspecified reasons. I imagined the conversations happening behind closed doors. The Porter family's reaction to sudden unexpected Vale heirs, Elise adjusting to a fiancé who now had obligations beyond their carefully planned merger of fortunes. To her credit, when Adrian finally introduced the twins to her at a carefully orchestrated lunch at a neutral restaurant, she was gracious if reserved. A woman raised in the traditions of old money, she understood the importance of bloodlines and legacy, even when they arrived in unexpected packages. "Do you have children of your own?" Maya asked her directly, in that unfiltered way of 6-year-olds. Elise blinked, momentarily startled by the question. "No, not yet." "Are you going to have them with our dad?" Elisa's porcelain composure cracked slightly. She looked to Adrian, who answered with surprising gentleness. "That's something Elise and I might discuss in the future," he said. "But right now, I'm focused on getting to know you and Marcus." It was the right answer, honest without being confusing, acknowledging the complexity of the situation without burdening the twins with adult concerns. I saw something shift in Elisa's expression as she watched Adrian with the children. Perhaps she was seeing a different side of her fiancé than the business titan she'd agreed to marry. Elise Porter became Elise Vale in a spring wedding that made all the society pages. The twins were not present, not yet ready for public acknowledgement in Adrian's carefully managed world. I understood his caution. The media scrutiny would be intense once the existence of Vale heirs became known, and he wanted to protect them from that spotlight until necessary. But privately, steadily, he carved space in his life for Sunday afternoons in the park, for school science fairs, for conversations about dinosaurs and stars and how buildings stand against earthquakes. He learned the names of their friends, remembered which foods they disliked, noticed when Maya got a haircut or when Marcus mastered a new skating trick. The most surprising transformation was in how he engaged with them. Adrian, who had spent his adult life issuing directives and expecting immediate compliance, learned to negotiate with 6-year-olds. He adjusted his language to their understanding without talking down to them. He answered their endless questions with patience, admitting when he didn't know the answer and researching it with them. 3 months after that first visit to our apartment, I stood in the kitchen doorway watching as Adrian sat at our small table with the twins, helping them with a science project involving batteries and small motors. His suit jacket was draped over a chair, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up to avoid the mess. "Do electrons have feelings?" Marcus asked, a question that would have irritated the Adrian I'd married with its apparent irrelevance. Adrian considered the question seriously. "We don't have any scientific evidence that they do," he replied. "But science is always evolving. What makes you think they might?" "Because they get so excited when they move," Marcus explained. "They make lights turn on and motors spin. That seems like they're happy to be doing their job." Adrian smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "That's an interesting hypothesis. How could we test it?" Maya, never one to indulge what she considered her brother's flights of fancy, interjected with her usual practicality. "Electrons follow the path of least resistance. That's not feelings. That's just physics." "Perhaps," Adrian said, "but many things we now understand scientifically were once attributed to more magical explanations. Being open to unusual questions is how scientific discoveries happen." I watched Maya absorb this, her expression thoughtful. The Adrian I'd married would have sided with her logical assessment and dismissed Marcus's question as childish imagination. This Adrian was teaching them both, Maya to remain open to creative thinking, Marcus to channel his imaginative questions into scientific inquiry. Later, after the twins had gone to bed, Adrian lingered in the living room, examining the children's artwork displayed on our walls. "They're thriving," he said quietly. "You've done an extraordinary job with them, Victoria." I made a lot of mistakes along the way, I admitted, joining him by a particularly colorful finger painting from their preschool days. "We all do." His voice carried a weight of regret I hadn't heard before. If I'd known, he didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. If he'd known about the pregnancy, would he have been the father they needed? Would he have become this version of himself earlier, or would he have remained the Adrian who sent assistants flowers during my miscarriage? "It's pointless to speculate," I said gently. "We're here now. They're happy, healthy, and now they have both of us." He turned to face me, his expression unguarded in a way I'd rarely seen during our marriage. "Thank you. For bringing them to the gala. For giving me the chance to know them, despite everything. I didn't do it for you," I said honestly. "I did it for them. And maybe a little for me to close that chapter properly. Still. Thank you." He checked his watch, a gesture so familiar it brought an unexpected wave of nostalgia. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow." I walked him to the door, the domestic routine strange between us once spouses, now co-parents navigating an uncharted middle ground. "Same time on Sunday?" he asked, referring to what had become a regular weekend visit. I nodded. "They're looking forward to the Science Museum." He paused, his hand on the doorknob. I meant what I said. "They're extraordinary children, Victoria. And so is the woman who raised them." The words hung between us, sincere and uncomplicated by the business calculations that had colored so many of our interactions during marriage. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Sometimes, watching him explain structural engineering concepts to Marcus using playground equipment as models, or listening as Maya challenged his assumptions with her particular brand of clear-eyed logic, I caught glimpses of the man I'd once believed existed beneath the veil, empire capable of connection, of presence, of joy unrelated to acquisition or achievement. 6 months after that New Year's Eve revelation, Adrian invited us to dinner at his and Elisa's penthouse apartment in the city. This was new territory. The twins had never visited any of his homes, our interactions carefully contained to neutral locations or our apartment. It's time they see that part of my life too, he explained when I expressed concern. They should understand all of who I am, not just the version that visits on weekends. The penthouse was exactly what I would have expected, sleek, modern, impeccably decorated in a style that spoke of wealth without warmth. The twins explored with wide eyes, Marcus immediately drawn to the floor-to-ceiling windows with their panoramic city views, Maya examining the expensive art with critical assessment. "This painting isn't very good," she announced, studying a large abstract canvas that probably cost more than my annual salary. "It's just shapes without purpose." Elise, who had been observing from a careful distance, surprisingly laughed. "I've been telling Adrian the same thing for months," she admitted. "It was selected by the decorator for its investment value, not its artistic merit." "Mom says art should speak to your heart, not your wallet," Marcus contributed, pressing his nose against the window glass in a way that made me wince, anticipating Adrian's reaction. But Adrian merely smiled, handing him a cloth to wipe the smudge. "Your mother is right, as usual. Perhaps you could help me select some better pieces." Throughout dinner, served by a private chef in a dining room larger than our entire apartment, I watched Elise observe the dynamics between Adrian and the twins. Her expression shifted from polite interest to something more genuine as she witnessed his patience with Marcus's boundless energy and his engagement with Maya's precise questions. "You're different with them," she said to Adrian during a moment when the twins were distracted by the elaborate dessert being served. "I've never seen this side of you." "I'm still discovering it myself," he admitted, his gaze following the children with unmistakable pride. By the time we prepared to leave, Elise had relaxed considerably, even joining Marcus on the floor to examine a complex puzzle Adrian had purchased for him. As we waited for the elevator, she pulled me aside briefly. "They're wonderful children, Victoria," she said with apparent sincerity. "I want you to know that I consider their place in Adrian's life and our lives to be important and permanent." The gracious acknowledgement from the woman who by all rights might have resented my children's sudden appearance in her carefully planned future spoke volumes about her character. I found myself genuinely thanking her, any lingering resentment I might have harbored dissolving in the face of her evident goodwill. In the elevator descending from the penthouse, Maya leaned against me, tired from the long evening. "Dad said we could visit his office next week," she murmured sleepily. "He's going to show me how the computers work." "Dad." The word fell so naturally from her lips now, no longer a formal designation but a relationship she had embraced. Marcus too had adapted quickly, his natural openness allowing him to accept Adrian into his life with minimal reservation. Children's capacity for forgiveness and adaptation never ceased to amaze me. As we hailed a taxi outside the luxury building, Adrian crouched to say goodbye to the twins, accepting their drowsy hugs with visible emotion. "Thank you for coming to my home," he said formally, as though concluding a business dinner rather than a family gathering. "It meant a great deal to me." "Can we come again?" Marcus asked through a yawn. "Your place has the best windows for seeing the whole city." Adrian smiled, ruffling his hair with an ease that would have been unimaginable months earlier. "Anytime you want. It's your place too, in a way." The significance of those words wasn't lost on me. In his methodical, careful fashion, Adrian was building bridges between his compartmentalized worlds, introducing the twins to his home, his wife, soon his workplace. Integrating them into his life in a way that acknowledged their permanence and importance. We were not the family I had imagined when I fell in love with Adrian Vale. We were something messier, more complicated, built on hard truths rather than romantic illusions. But watching my children discover parts of themselves reflected in their father, watching him discover parts of himself reflected in them, I realized that sometimes the most valuable journeys begin with moments of calculated risk, like showing up at a New Year's Eve gala, ready to upend a carefully constructed world with the simple, undeniable truth of two small faces. If you believe that truth, even difficult truth, eventually sets us free, hit that like button right now. Comment, better late than never, if you think it's never too late to create the relationships that matter most in life. A year after that fateful New Year's Eve gala, Adrian suggested we return to Seacliff Manor for the holidays. The twins had never seen the house that had once been my home, that had been intended as their home before fate and choices intervened. I was hesitant at first. Seacliff held complicated memories for me. The hope of early marriage, the gradual disappointment as Adrian retreated into work, the final painful conversations before our separation. But the twins were excited about visiting the ocean castle their father had mentioned, and I recognized the symbolic importance of the invitation. The house looked different when we arrived, warmer somehow despite the winter chill. Holiday decorations softened the modern architecture, and family photos had appeared among the more formal art pieces, including, to my surprise, several framed photographs of the twins that Adrian must have taken during their weekend outings. As the twins explored the house with the enthusiasm of children discovering an adventure park, Adrian led me to the terrace overlooking the ocean, the spot where we had once planned our future together, where we had envisioned raising a family. "I wanted you to see what's changed," he said quietly as we watched the waves crash against the cliffs below. "Not just the house. Me. I've seen it," I assured him. "In how you are with them. In who you've become as their father." He nodded, his gaze still on the horizon. "When you walked into the gala that night with them, I was angry. I felt manipulated, blindsided." He glanced at me. "I was right about being blindsided, but wrong about the manipulation. You weren't using them as weapons. You were giving all of us a chance we didn't deserve." "I don't think of it in terms of deserving," I said. "Life isn't that simple." "No, it isn't." He turned to face me fully. "But I want you to know that I understand now why you made the choices you did. After seeing how I handled your miscarriage, after experiencing how completely I had subsumed myself into the veil identity, you had every reason to protect them from that version of me." The acknowledgement, delivered without defensiveness or qualification, was a gift I hadn't expected. "Thank you for understanding." He smiled slightly. Understanding came later. The twins came first. They forced me to see myself through different eyes, not as the veil heir or the CEO or even as Elisa's husband, but simply as a father. As someone who needed to be worthy of their trust and love. Inside, we could hear the twins' laughter echoing through rooms that had once felt too large, too empty. Marcus had discovered the home theater and was apparently experimenting with the surround sound system, while Maya's voice carried from the library where she was likely examining Adrian's collection of engineering texts. "Elise has been extraordinary through all of this," Adrian continued. "She's embraced them without reservation, despite the complication they represent to our carefully structured plans." "She seems like a remarkable woman," I agreed sincerely. "Very different from how I imagined her." "She is. Different from how I imagined too, in some ways. This situation has revealed strengths in her I didn't fully appreciate before." He paused, his expression thoughtful. "Similar to how parenthood revealed aspects of you I failed to see during our marriage." The comparison surprised me. "Is that how you see it? That we both needed the right circumstances to be fully seen?" "Perhaps. Or perhaps we needed to become the right versions of ourselves to do the seeing." Inside, the sound system suddenly blasted what was clearly Marcus testing volume limits, followed by Elisa's gentle suggestion that perhaps a lower setting would preserve everyone's hearing. Adrian laughed, the sound carried away by the ocean breeze. Another change. I would have been irritated by that interruption before. Now I find it life-affirming. As we moved to rejoin the others, he paused at the doorway. "Victoria, I want you to know that I consider the night you brought the twins to the gala to be the most important course correction of my life. You could have continued to raise them without me, and by all evidence, they would have thrived. Your strength made that possible." The words touched something deep within me, not the lingering ember of romantic love, but a recognition of our shared journey and how far we had both traveled since that night. "They deserve both of us," I said simply. "Different as we are, they need both perspectives. Your ambition and my groundedness. Your strategic thinking and my emotional intelligence. The perfect combination," he agreed with a smile. "Which is why they're so extraordinary." As we rejoined the twins and Elise in the main room, where a massive Christmas tree dominated the space that had once housed Adrian's minimalist sculpture collection, I was struck by how life's most important turns often come disguised as its greatest challenges. My decision to attend that New Year's Eve gala hadn't been entirely pure in motivation. There had been an element of justified anger, of wanting Adrian to face the consequences of the way our marriage had ended. But what had begun as a moment of calculated confrontation had evolved into something none of us could have predicted, a family reconfigured by truth, strengthened by forgiveness, expanded by acceptance. We were not the family I had once dreamed of with Adrian. We were something messier, more complicated, built on hard truths rather than romantic illusions. But watching my children find themselves reflected in both their parents, watching Adrian discover the father he could be, watching even Elise find her place in this unconventional arrangement, I realized that families aren't built on perfect circumstances but on persistent love. The midnight tide of that New Year's Eve had washed away old patterns, leaving behind something none of us had anticipated, not the family we planned, but the one we needed to become. If you believe that sometimes the most difficult conversations can lead to the most beautiful outcomes, hit the like button right now. Share this story with someone who might need encouragement to speak their truth, even when it's terrifying. And subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories for more powerful journeys of courage, forgiveness, and love redefined. What would you have done in Victoria's shoes? Would you have kept the secret forever or found the courage to reveal the truth? Comment below with your thoughts on second chances and what it means to truly forgive someone who once broke your heart. Because in the end, the most powerful stories aren't about perfect people making perfect choices. They're about real, flawed humans finding their way back to what matters most even if the path looks nothing like what they originally planned.